When working on gray paper, you need to start very lightly to sketch in the figure. I'm just here very lightly scanning over with the main objective of placing the figure fully on the paper so I know where it's going to be before I make any corrections. As I go, I'm getting into a little more detail with things like the hands and the face, but only as far with enough marks to place it on the page. Once the figure is fully on the page, I'm going to start with the form shadows. And these are generally pretty light gray, so I'm with a very light touch and working with the texture of the paper, toning in those gray areas. And these are the most important shadows in that they really are defining the volume and the form of the figure. These are the most common shadows you'll find on the figure. You'll find that these curve around the form and go easy when you get to the darker spots and try to blend some of those transitions into the tones you've just laid down. These are more of the cast shadows. Here I'm going back into the form shadow and I'm slightly darkening that area where the form shadow transitions into the light. There's a tendency for that to happen with form shadows, is they will very, very slightly appear to get a little bit darker right before they turn into the light part of the figure. There's some cast shadows, and I'm just getting slightly darker like I did in that area on the shoulder there. So in this part, still reserve some of the darkest areas for towards the end of the drawing. And again, work with the texture of the paper and allow it to be part of the drawing. That's one of the reasons that this type of paper generally has a texture, is so that you work with it and don't try to bury it too much. Now I'm putting in the last touches, such as the cast shadow here, with the awareness that that cast shadow is going to be probably darker than most of the form shadows that we see on the figure. And again, the very darkest area being about where the figure is interacting with the ground plane. And this really will anchor it in place there with those slightly darker areas at the core of the cast shadows. Now we're ready to look for the highlights. And I'm taking very small marks with these and just touching on the highlights. So go with small areas, and remember the gray of the paper is going to be the average light or the half tone of the figure. So work with the gray as if so the white and the gray are basically part of the same light side of the figure. Just marks, for example, where a vein pops to the surface or the edge of a bone comes to the surface are really good for using that to accentuate. Use some of the broad side or of the white chalk or conté crayon, and with very minimal amounts of it, broadly put some of those over the surface to pull out the volumes where those highlights are hitting the figure. A little blending will occur between when the white and the black conté or charcoal interact with each other, and that's fine. But avoid using a blending stump to pull them together. On these, allow the paper to show through. We want the gray to be visible, and keep in mind that the gray and the white of the paper are the light side of the figure. And then as you complete the drawing, get more and more into the fine detail and really look for the small aspects of the fine finish of the drawing.